Jared here. Now, I've come up to talk about some things that have troubled me for many a year. A long time ago, I encountered the concept of free speech. For a long time, I was steadfast to the idea that free speech, at least as the person who introduced it to me, you might know him as the Amazing Atheist, or TJ, that free speech, or freedom of expression, was an essential thing. Something that was important for us to create a society where people could speak their minds, but most importantly, do what they believed was right. Since then, there have been many a conversation. Some people strongly believe the idea that free speech could not be allowed, and that there must be certain speech that is curtailed because it is evil and wrong. And for a long time I thought about this. Now there's a recent type of philosophical idea I've encountered recently. I've been reading a lot of stories, and on certain forums people talk about such things as whether it's right to kill a villain even if they haven't yet done any evil. If it would save millions of lives, is it right to become judge, jury and executioner? Now you might ask, well, why am I comparing these two things? They seem completely different. Arresting or fining people for saying racist, sexist, or other such things seems completely different from killing someone. But it brings up a possibility. The reason and the conclusion in that forum that we all came to was that to kill someone, to murder them, to judge them, even as an individual actor, because for a single person to make the judgment that they are going to commit such evil, and not even that, but simply potential, because as of that moment they have not yet done anything. They might be stopped, there might become a way to prevent them, they might never have been able to succeed in the first place, or they might have even simply been lying. And does that not apply to freedom of speech as well? I mean, we say how all this fascism and such, and racism and sexism will just spread and get worse, but I mean, if you say all that, then aren't you kind of tempting it to be true? I mean, think about it. If you believe that if you allow freedom of speech, there'll be evil, and because of that you use that as a justification for the potential, then in a way, aren't you putting the cart before the horse? It just doesn't seem to make sense, does it? And not only that, but while there certainly are evil people out there who would use free speech, who would abuse it, why must we simply bind and gag their mouths rather than simply opposing them with reason and logic, with love and hope, rather than assuming that we can't possibly beat them without simply cutting out their tongue? Doesn't it seem kind of fatalistic and cynical? In a way, it's almost wrong. Now, this might apply to none of you, seeing as I already mentioned the Amazing Atheist, but I'm actually a Christian, and I've been for quite a few years now. There was a period of about 8 years or so where I was an atheist, where I didn't believe in a God. And it was only after a certain incident where, I'm not really sure how to say now, I would call it a miracle, but in truth, the reason I believed was because at that point I wanted to believe, and so I had faith. And for a Christian, well, there is a God, yes? There is one true God above all. And so, God is good, and all that is done is because of He. It is said in the Bible that He will punish the sinners, and that if you merely believe, He will do just and He will do good, and if you merely pray, then He will do so. Because this is God's world. Everything within it is His creation. And so the only reason we have all this evil and such is because He allows it to exist. And we have all the prophecies in the Bible of what will happen and such. And some are fulfilled and some await fulfillment. And so, if you say there is a necessary evil, such as not allowing free speech, aren't you kind of denying God? If you're a Christian, how can you even believe in necessary evil? Because, well, haven't we all already been saved? In a sense, isn't necessary evil a denial of God itself? Now, some of you might say, oh, well, what about things where freedom of speech, or absolute freedom of speech, could lead to horrible things? I mean, let's say you have a crowded theatre and someone that shouts fire, fire, and they all go on a stampede and people die and such. Has the person who said that killed those people? But then, you know, that would also happen if there was a fire, wouldn't it? I mean, aren't we kind of blaming the wrong person here? Why are people allowed to stampede in a furthest panic without being held responsible for their actions? I mean, the quickest way to act to evacuate a building is to move orderly and smoothly, because otherwise you actually slow down the ability of people to move. And of course, well, you're also killing the people that get stampeded and trampled upon. And furthermore, isn't it a bit odd, so to speak? I mean, isn't the real problem with a person saying there's fire, isn't the whole problem that they lied? And well, we all agree that lying is bad. But we don't arrest people for lying. It's simply frowned upon. It's something people are held accountable for. So even than that, there are still consequences for free speech. But while I can agree that you could argue that there should be consequences for this sort of thing, isn't that still believing in necessary evil? Should we not create a society, a world even, where people don't lie about fire in a crowded theatre, hoping that people will die, and where people in a crowded theatre don't happily trample others underfoot because they're afraid for their lives, even knowing that such is only putting them more at risk of death if there is a fire, and killing others, possibly themselves, if there isn't, or is. That's all I have to say for today, and so I bid you goodbye. Do enjoy the full moon, and good night.